I am here today with a man named Tony with a beard like mine, which is always good. Morning, Tony.
Good morning. Good morning.
Now, we were just chatting a little bit about who you are, and what you're here to talk about. And I'll be honest, my little brain is struggling just a little bit to get my head around this. So let me try and get as far as I can, then you can finish off the sentence. So, Home for Good, Safer Families have recently amalgamated to join together to create one organisation. And I understand some of that because Home for Good has a slightly different look from, say, for families and what they would do. Home for Good in particular would advise people who wanted to foster, and Safer Families would try and help children to not be fostered, if that's about right, I think. And then they've joined forces, which is brilliant. And then there's Homecoming, which is what you're involved in and talking to me about today. Have I got any of that right so far?
Yes, that sounds
Yes.
good.
Good. Okay. Because I try and remember this stuff, but it comes in and bounces out. Right, now, we're going to talk a little bit about Homecoming, which is a coalition of all sorts of people. So we'll get into that a bit more later, but just give us an overview. What is Homecoming all about?
So we are this group of organisations, and we believe that children thrive in families, and not only children thrive in families in the UK, but around the world. And we've seen, and actually we've just done a piece of research that shows that the UK church is incredibly invested in serving and supporting vulnerable children around the world, which is a brilliant piece of news. The UK church spends £500 million a year on orphanages, which is mind-blowing, and is such amazing piece of news that the church cares so much about vulnerable children. But we're learning, and there's about 80 years of research now that says that orphanages are not the best place for children. Children thrive in families, and that's how God's designed this, really. So we're trying to support that kind of thinking and that learning towards helping the church really land their money and their volunteering as well in a way that is the best for those vulnerable children around the world. So that's our focus.
That's a big figure, 500 million a year from the
Yes.
church for children in orphanages. However you want to split that up or whatever perspective, that's a big number.
Yes. No, I mean, and for me, that's brilliant. Look how much the church cares. You know, in James, it says that the religion that God accepts is how we look after orphans and widows.
Mm.
And for me, that's brilliant that our heart is so out there for the most vulnerable and marginalized. But we just really want to partner with the church and our international colleagues in this field to make sure the children that we all care about are receiving really what they need, and not maybe a historic model of work that we've just kind of still using.
It's dead easy, isn't it, to think, well, we've done this, so we'll do that, and we keep on doing it because we did it, we do it, and we'll keep on again doing it. But actually, it is good to revision. Well, okay, but this is the need. This is what we're doing with that need. But actually, is there a better way? Which I guess is what we're talking about today with Homecoming.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I always lean into, the verse in Isaiah that says, learn to do good and seek justice and help the oppressed, defend the cause of the orphans. And I think we need to, in our faith journey and everything we do, we need to continually learn so that we're on that cutting edge.
Hmm. Right. So you talked about being a coalition. Who are some of the members of this coalition for this for the Homecoming?
So we've got Home for Good, we've got Safe Families, we've got 318, we've got Tear Fund Ireland are really involved. There's some organisations that are involved actually in the orphanage sector around the world. So we've got Hope and Homes, we've got SFAC. I'm going to get in trouble if I miss somebody out, but we've got some incredible partners, and it's a growing coalition. If anyone's listening and you want to get involved, get in contact, because we're now in a position to grow this coalition to really multiply the impact of what we're trying to do.
I want to come into more detail later on, but what is it you're actually doing as Homecoming? You've got this group of people you want to improve. I guess, in a sense, my English would be you're trying to improve the provision for children who are not in families at this time. But what is it that you're actually doing at the moment through Homecoming?
So we're working in several kind of spheres. What we're mainly focusing on right now is we're doing like a multi-organizational social media campaign. So we've developed some messages that help people to start thinking about how they are serving vulnerable children around the world. And that's going out through different organizations, and that will filter people in to the website. And we've developed what we're calling a learning journey, which is 8 emails, which will help people understand and learn a little bit more about this international orphanage context and how we can practically move forward and improve the way we care for these children.
This is a much wider conversation, isn't it? This isn't how can we improve the security at a location of an orphanage. This is much bigger than that, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, we're talking about estimates are really challenging because there's lots of unregistered orphanages, but conservatively, there's 5.4 million children living in orphanages around the world. And actually, we found that 80% of those have living parents. So we're really encouraging this thought, what could we do to support the parents so that families didn't have to be separated? Most of those children are separated due to poverty, due to lack of education or lack of healthcare services. And actually the detrimental effect to children because of that separation is serious. And if we can provide satellite schools instead of orphanages, or if we can deal with healthcare challenges or education challenges, it would retain those family units and it will be so good for those children. And that's really the heart of what we want. We want to see these children around the world thriving. And I think the church does as well. The amount of money they put into it, this is important. So we want to work together to really make sure that care and that good intention is landing exactly how those children need it.
Fab. We'll come back to this in a while, but I always like to look a little bit more. So you're working for this coalition, home. I keep on saying homekeeping, housekeeping, but homecoming. I keep on getting the wrong
Yes.
name. But what's your own faith journey? You're talking about God design. You're talking about faith. You're quoting scripture, but how does God fit into your life? How did that begin for you?
So I've been in a Christian family all my life, and I felt called to be a missionary. And eventually God lined things up, and we spent 12 years working in Brazil in orphanages. So when talking to me, there's no judgment about mistakes or anything. I've done it and I've lived it. And I've seen the challenges, I've seen the need. And actually, in those 12 years in Brazil, the last 5 years, we spent supporting an organization to transition towards foster care. So we went around churches and mobilized those churches to become foster parents. We worked with the judiciary and the local social services, and it was slow and it was hard work. But it's such a joy now to see the team of Brazilians that are still running that service, placing children in families and seeing those children looked after in a family context, which is so much more healthy and beneficial for their development.
Mm.
And I felt all the way through that God opening crazy doors. I couldn't have done those last 5 years if I hadn't have served in the orphanages and served in those different contexts. But, I've been through a journey and learned that if we really grab hold of God's heart for children, God's heart for the vulnerable, and then put that into those contexts where there's children that are really desperately in need, family is the piece of the puzzle that is needed.
It's I love people who don't just say, we could do something about this. Let's have a think. I mean, it's like an action man thing. You've gone off to Brazil and you've actually done the stuff that you're now talking about. So when you're talking, it helps, I think, for us to understand that you're not just saying, look, it's a really nice idea if kids can be in families. I mean, yeah, we can understand that. But beyond that, you're saying, look, this is the difference it can make. Just wanted to pick up one thing you said, just people who may not know the terming, but what is foster care? What does that actually mean? What does it look like?
So foster care internationally is the same as it looks here. So it's where if a child cannot safely stay with their biological family, then there would be another family who is willing to take them into their family. There's hopefully training and support. Certainly in the UK and certainly in Brazil where we did it, it was all organised with the judges and the local social services. But it's a trained, equipped, supported family that would take that child in, and hopefully, always the plan is that their biological family could be supported until the point where that family can live with them safely. And if that doesn't happen, then you look for hopefully another more permanent solution. But that's roughly foster care in a nutshell.
Terms like that, I just think, do we really understand that? Because I think sometimes we think we do, and I think sometimes we probably don't. And I'm quite happy to say, not fully sure sometimes. I don't mind making that point. Normally I'd say to people, how do you get into what you're doing now? But if you've lived in Brazil, if you spent 5 years really pushing that, it makes sense where you're at. But the other thing I guess we wanted to pick up, 31.8, which people may know or may not know. If you're in a church, you may have heard of them, you may have had some training or something from them. But actually 31.8 is really, it helps churches and Christian ministries to really do what they're supposed to be doing in regards to safeguarding. So I find it's really encouraging for me because I know of 31.8 from a very different perspective, that they're part of that. But if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, so what you're saying is you're going to put kids back in homes where it's not safe. Now, I know that's not what you're talking about, but let's just tease it out a little bit, because I think in today's society, sadly, we need to kind of state the obvious. So we're not saying 80% of kids, we're going to chuck them back regardless because that's where they should be. That's not what we're talking about at all, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, when you talk about reintegration of children into their families, it's with the support that they need. So, I mean, there's a story about a girl called Tabitha who moved. Her mother had to give her up because she couldn't provide for her. And she lived for a number of years in an orphanage. This is in Nepal. But she was young when she left, and she forgot her native tongue from her village. She even forgot what her mother looked like. But then an organisation partnered with that orphanage and decided, let's see what we can do. And so they went back to the family and said, why? Why was this child separated? And it was like, okay, she can't afford school. A grant for school is cheaper than a child in an orphanage. And she can stay in a loving family. There was issues about food and often poverties. But if you can address these root causes, then so many of that 5.4 million children can go back. These so many families that are loving, and actually the families think they're doing the best for their children by sending them to an orphanage where they'll get medical care, where they'll get 3 meals a day. And some of these realities are hard. I mean, I've lived this. I've seen children living in not situations of plenty, but actually the effects of separation from your mother and your father and your siblings is really, really damaging. And it's better to support families and strengthen families in the challenges they face than go for what sometimes is the easy option of, we can rent a house, we can employ a team, and we can fill it with children so that they get what's considered their basic needs. They're fed, they're educated, they have healthcare. But actually some of these other really essential needs of family and belonging and identity that can have such an impact on the rest of their lives kind of get missed, because with the model of an orphanage or a children's village or whatever you want to phrase, whatever word you want to call, if it's not family, if you haven't got somewhere to go back to and celebrate your victories and commiserate your challenges, you're lost in the rest of your life. It's really, really challenging. And I've known people that have gone through this, and they find it really, really hard to form really positive relationships after they've been in an orphanage for so long. So it's trying to go past those what is considered essential needs of food and education and looking at the entire need of the child.
I guess part of it is we can fix this. We see children, and therefore we're going to do the best thing for them. We'll stick them somewhere where they can be safe and be fed and medical. And it's, in a sense, it's almost the easier solution because it's quite fast. We can put a building. Well, there's a building. Right, we'll fill that. We'll just send some people across, and we'll care for the children. That's brilliant in the short term, but of course, the stuff you're talking about is never ever going to be the fast solution. It might be the long term solution, but you're talking about supporting someone for 20 years here, whereas an orphanage, great, now they're safe. Well, yes and no.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so, yeah, the physicality and organizing an orphanage is quick, but also what we found in the missions community, that over the last however many 100 years, we've had a tendency of walking in and saying, this is how things should be done. And with this move back to family, we're really working in partnership with locals and listening to the voice of the locals. We don't want to come in again as, you know, you can't see, this is a radio interview, but I'm a white, middle-class, middle-aged man. And it's not my place to go anywhere and say, this is how you should do it. But I've lived in Brazil and I know that the locals value this approach. And we have partners that are working in Kenya and Uganda and Nepal. And it's this move is being driven and directed not primarily by us as white or as British middle-class people. It's we're listening to the voices of people receiving our aid and our care, and we're trying to guide it into what is going to land best for them and empowering them and supporting them. So that makes it a lot slower and a lot harder because it's not just us going and imposing our ideas, but it means it is better and it's more respectful and it's healthier. And that's kind of what we're drawing together.
I think there has been a change in ministries. I'm just going to say UK. Let's not go too far afield, but UK ministries where I think people are saying more and more, okay, how do we support people where they are with the resources that we have that they don't have? How can we support them rather than saying, okay, well, you're doing this wrong because you need to do it our way? I'm reminded of Back to Jerusalem, which is a Chinese missionaries organization. And they speak of when the Chinese house churches were growing, they said, we need Bibles. That's it. Just send Bibles. And quite a few people would then send, well, here's a Bible and a tract for why you should be a Baptist or a Pentecostal or an Anglican. And all of a sudden, these kind of factions then created themselves within that because we didn't actually support what they needed, which was Bibles. It was Bibles with, by the way, here's how to apply your Bible to your daily life, which they didn't actually need. And I guess what is encouraging to me as somebody who's worked in churches and been in church my whole life is more organizations are saying, okay, so you're in Senegal, you're in Nepal, you're in Brazil. How can we support you with what you actually need where you are? Because I can have a Zoom meeting with somebody in Brazil. I can go on Google Street Maps and probably drive down the street, so to speak. But if I'm not there, then I'm actually not there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, something I really love about, so Safe Families, one of our coalition members, they identified that loads of children in the UK were going into the care system because of social isolation. So really simply, they mobilize church volunteers to get partnered and journey with families that are going through challenges, reducing the social isolation and reducing families from being separated. And it's brilliant. But that approach is not about taking that approach necessarily and dumping it in all the other countries we're considering. It's looking, why are children being separated? And then how do we address that? And looking at the culture, something about Brazil that I loved historically in the northeast of Brazil where I was, there was this piece called Mãe de Coração. It was like Mother of the Heart. And it was actually foster care. Historically, in the culture there was foster care. It was unsupported by social services and psychologists and all that, unfinancially supported. And some of the children at the highest level of risk may not have had that opportunity. So we can come in and say, look at this piece of your culture that's brilliant. If we organise it with social services, so the children that are at most need engage and receive this beautiful part of your culture, and we put it all together, and then it works, it's fantastic. So it's looking at local needs, local culture, and how we can pair that all together and see children thrive. That's our heart.
That's got to be the passion, surely, of everybody. Anybody who says they're going to follow Christ, like you said, that I love that scripture. We skip past it, don't we? Pure religion. Oh, religion's terrible. Oh, look, no. There is good religion,
Yes.
and
Yes.
James tells exactly what it is. And it's caring for the orphans, the widows, and not being polluted by the world. That is pure religion. And
Yes.
if we skip past that because religion's bad, we've just missed an amazing thing. Right at the heart of scripture that tells us what we're supposed to do. Don't know what to do with your time of your day? Right, go and help an orphan. Go and help a widow. There you go. If you don't know what else, if you do nothing else in your life, you've just pleased God because you've just exercised pure religion.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Sometimes we stop reading that verse at the word orphan. It's how we go and support the orphan. Because sometimes supporting the orphan and the widow together, in that context, it's talking about a child who has lost their father but still has their mother. We read it as let's help the orphan, but actually it's orphan and widow. There isn't a disconnect there, and it's really a really strong biblical basis, but reinforcing that family unit, reinforcing the good that's there, and not separating. In the verses, it's orphan and widow. It's in one breath. It's together. So, we're really trying to lean into that and give God the religion that he considers pure and true.
Beautiful. Brother Andrew, Open Doors, it's very much my mind at the moment. I've read the book again recently, but I love the part where he was right at the early part of his ministry. He's in, I think it was Czechoslovakia for the first time, and he's watching what's going on, and he's thinking, well, what can I do? I'm one person from effectively Western Europe. What can I possibly do? And God reminded him to basically encourage believers that are already there. You don't need to go and start churches. Already churches there. Just go and encourage them. And so much of what I read in the book that I take away is he didn't start lots of works. He didn't do lots of projects. He just encouraged the faithful. He encouraged the believers. He went and said, hi, I'm from other part of the world. And do you know what? I love Jesus. And can I encourage you and pray for you? And that was a lot of what I think he did that I take away from it. And that effectively is what you're saying. It's, okay, hi, we love Jesus, but how can we help you do what you're doing, but do better where you are? What resources do you need?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that throughout all of what we're doing, the way we're working in partnership with the UK Church is that how can we work together? The way we want to promote the UK Church to work with their partners. Out in the field, I mean, from my experience, I worked with an orphanage and helped them transition to family care because they already knew the culture, they already knew the law, they already knew the judges. So actually, as potential catalysts for change, we don't want to demonize orphanage owners. There's some people out there that do it for money, and it's wrong, and there are challenges, and we don't want to say they're all great, but there are a lot of good-hearted people out there running orphanages, and they are really well positioned to rethink and re-engage with the need and do things that are really good for children.
Fab. So you talked about some of the things that Homecoming is going to be doing. You talked about the different coalitions, but how can people really get involved and engage with this? Is this only church leaders who can think, okay, our church can do this, or is this for everybody?
This is for everyone, so for church leaders and for anyone who's interested, we've got this learning journey that will really step by step look at some of the challenges, and it's nuanced. It's not like a real simple stop doing this and do something else instead. But yeah, it will help people have that broader understanding. So I would encourage church leaders, members of the congregation, whoever that are like, I'm supporting an orphanage or I'm supporting, lots of people don't know the nitty gritty of what they're supporting. So this kind of learning journey will help people to say, oh, I've got this question. I'm going to go and ask the people I support, oh, why did the children go into the orphanage? Or is it an orphanage? Or is it a day centre? Or just helping people understand. The first step really is understand what they support and what they're investing in. And then people have a say. People have influence. You know, if you're funding something, saying, oh, is this a possibility? If people are coming, identifying why children are coming in and saying, could we support a project that fed families that were hungry, or trained people so they could work, or educate? Do you mean whatever the need is that's driving families to be separated is having that voice. So churches and our international partners really strengthening their relationships. That's what we're calling for. So one thing that's really important, we're not calling people to today stop funding orphanages, because that will only make the children in the orphanages more vulnerable. So we're promoting dialogue and strengthening. There may be a day, if the organisation you're supporting really doesn't align with your values, that you have to say, okay, let's talk about a 2-year phase out of our funding because we really value children being in families. That's great. But the first port of call that I'm really encouraging is go and strengthen your relationships with our partners around the world and say, how can we see these children thriving in families?
Which is it's not just a beautiful idea or an ideal. This is the heart of the gospel. It is about families and the power of family. You know, we're seen as the bride of Christ, which is weird when you think, oh, I'm a bloke, I can be a bride, but you need to get past the English language and get back into what the Bible's really trying to, the heart of it. But that's what we're talking about, that the family model, the church being a family, we've all got a part to play, the foot and the hand and the tooth and the ear, we've all got a different function. But if we all work together like a family, we're not all going to get on because there's that crazy uncle who does stuff you don't want. But you know what? That crazy uncle inspires some funny stories. So it's not all bad. And actually, it's changing the perspective of what we have in order to support, which is what I'm really, I love that I don't know who I'm going to talk to when I start these interviews. And I don't know much about what's going on most of the time. But it's encouraging when I hear the words partnership, when I hear the words, well, we're going to support what they're doing already. Because I think there can be such an arrogance of, well, I'm a Christian, I know Jesus, therefore you're wrong. You're already wrong. Let's go and ask the question. But the most valuable thing you've said to me is why? Yeah. Why does that happen? Why did that child leave? Why did you feel you did? Why did you do that action? And if we can ask that in a loving way, not an accusatory way, we get an answer like, well, I couldn't afford school. Yeah. Well, we can fix that probably. That is worth chucking some money at because it's actually a fix, but that's not really the purpose. We do that and we fix so much more. So as an investment, it's kind of pence because of how much better the community will be.
Can I tell you a story?
Please.
We worked with a girl who was 14 and she was in a wheelchair, and she was in a government-run shelter in Brazil near where I was working. And she had a loving grandfather that she had been living with, but she was getting heavy as she's growing, and he was getting old, and he couldn't lift her onto the toilet. So the response was an orphanage, and the government didn't have the agility to respond in a different way. We were an NGO, we had that independence. We spent about £60 on a commode chair. And now she lives with her loving grandfather. How transformational is that story? How much does that show God's love for that girl? Yeah. And it's just about rethinking and questioning why. Yeah. What can be better? So we're both getting emotional now, aren't we?
Both crying now.
When you see those things happen and that reunited in a safe, loving family context, it just clicks and you're like, this needs to happen for 5.4 million people around the world. So it's a massive calling, but it's when it happens, you just see God's love shining through those situations.
Yeah. I think my tears are, what a frustratingly simple solution 60 quid is what? A meal out at a restaurant, maybe for a few people. It's, we have a good night, whatever. 60 quid's just transform that family. Now you've got an older person who's been cared for by somebody younger. As they get older, they're going to continue to care for that person. That compassion of care is going to grow and spill out. And all of a sudden, 60 quid, which, let's be honest, it ain't much. I don't care who you are, it's not a lot of money. That's just transformed a community.
And 60 quid is less than it costs to look after her in an orphanage for a month.
Which makes rather a strong point, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which is why I'm so passionate about supporting this as much as we can, because you know what? If we go through life, we just think, here's a problem, here's a solution. I've cut my finger, I'm going to put plaster on it. Well, yeah, but could you move the wall that you keep banging your hand onto? It's a really simple thing. My wife's always banging her feet on the side of the bed, and so we've moved bits around the bed. There was some next to the bed. It's the simplest of things. There was a little bag that lived on the floor in between the wall and the bed, so she avoided that and kicked the corner of the bed. We moved the bag, now she doesn't kick the bed. Yes, let's put an ice pack on it. That's the orphanage, I guess, in a sense. Sometimes we need that. But you know what? Moving a bag, buying a commode. Sometimes the simple solutions can have life-changing results for everybody. Tony, thank you. Honestly, there is some simple stuff that we can do, isn't there? And it doesn't need, I've said this for so long. We don't have to have complicated solutions to everything. We really, really don't. Right. Is there a website people can come and find out more if they want to get more directly involved with you?
Yes. So homecomingproject.org. There's loads of resources on there. There's sign up for the learning journey. The learning journey will really help you to understand the context. It will help you to ask the right questions. It will support you to develop and strengthen your international partnerships. And yeah, I hope it will be the first step towards seeing children thrive in families and doing really what the UK Church is passionate and committed to do. Get online, sign up for the learning journey. It's going to be a privilege to do it all with you. We're doing it first time round. We're doing it over Lent. So everyone who signs up between now and Lent, we'll all do it at the same time. But then after Lent, it will just roll and people will do it as they sign in. But let's all do it together at Lent. Pastors, tell your congregations about it. Let's get everyone involved to really nail down the best ways we can show the immense amount of care that the UK Church has for these vulnerable children.
Tony, thank you. That's beautiful. Get involved. Don't sit back and say, what can we do? We can all do something. And if we each did something, what a world would be. And thank you for what you're doing with this. With Homecoming, so homecomingproject.org.
That's right.
That's where you go and get all the information you get stuck in and is involved. Right, Tony, thank you for your time. Sharing some of your story in your heart and what's gone on. And just it's the reminder that we I should have stopped this interview now, but I'm not going to. So often we think the UK Church, look at all the bad stuff, look at the terrible, look at the media, look at this. Yeah, that's terrible and that's wrong and it needs to stop. Do you know what? There's some beautiful good as well. And if nothing else, take the positive. 500 million quid a year is going to orphanages from the church. 5.4 million children are in orphanages, and 80% of those children have parents or families who could care for them. So let's start asking the question why. Let's not stop pointing the finger and saying, look how bad that is. Let's ask the question why. What a difference.
Perfect.
Thank you, Tony.
Pleasure.